Hi everyone, this is Sleepless Starlight, and today I'll be drawing a very futuristic-esque, not chibi, sci-fi girl. Going into this rough sketch, I had no idea what I actually wanted this character to look like. I just had a color palette in mind, so I just kind of thought, yes, I want to do that. So I just had to kind of make it happen. I had art block too, so I was just trying to figure out what to do. In the end, it turned out pretty well though. So I was really dumb a second ago and was recording all these voiceovers, and then I realized my mic wasn't on, so that's why no audio was on. Ugh. I was so confused on why there wasn't any sound, but then I realized the mic was not on, so that was very dumb of me, but I found out how to get it working. I figured out what was wrong. I'm very proud of myself. So I was drawing these holograms around her. I wanted to make it seem like she was manipulating these, like a very futuristic version of an iPad kid. Uh, so basically, she has all these holograms around her that she's manipulating and using at her will. Basically, something pulled straight out of a sci fi movie, basically. So I drew her face because, people need those. And then I started going on to her hair. This in the rough sketch, I decided to give her short hair, kind of like a sweet little bob, and star-shaped space buns. But in the end, I decided to give her long hair in the rough sketch, in the final sketch, because I don't know. I guess I just kind of pulled everything together nicer. So I I gave her a sweater and a crop top because I thought that it might be fun to draw, but then I realized that it was a bit too short, so I made it a little bit longer for the sake of obvious reasons. So then I started questioning what should I add next because that's something that all artists are gonna ask themselves a lot. So I added these floofy sleeves and these boots that I was going to make have that I was going to make like look like they're floating, like they defy gravity itself. I decided to add more holograms because I felt like she did not have enough of them. I added a choker because I love those and I feel like they just really add together a character. Added some ears with lots of piercings. I always forget to add ears to my rough sketches or final design, so I always have to remind myself, hey, think of earrings, think of ears. People need to have those. So I was trying to figure out what to add next, and so I decided to make these boots seem like they're floating and very defying gravity, futuristic, sci-fi, pulled straight out of a space movie. Then I decided to give her what next? I decided to give her a ring, like a kind of like how Saturn has rings around her head. But then I realized Saturn's ring is in the middle, not the top or the bottom. So in the end, I decided to add it more towards her torso because I felt like that would just look better, and it did in the end. So I added these cuffs around her wrists to uh and I imagine that's where all these holograms are coming from, and that's basically a Fitbit that's just projecting all these holograms and stuff, and that's where all her things are coming from. Then, with all that, I was ready to head on to Cliff Studio Paint. So while I was getting my rough sketch onto my screen, I had my dog Estella on my lap. You can see her head at the bottom right screen a little bit. She was just sitting on my lap, overseeing everything and being a good manager. Uh, during this voiceover, actually, she's sitting on my right next to me right now, just hogging my heated blanket. And that thing is her best friend. Anyway, eventually she hopped down, and I got back down to making a second rough sketch. This is the first one is where I make all the ball joints, figure out what I want things to be, and then the second rough sketch is just me connecting all the dots, basically. But then once I'm done with the second rough sketch, I can actually get down to the other details like the face, hair, and clothes. So now I'm doing the face, and now I'm down to the hair. I had to really speed up this part because up to this point it was probably like a half an hour of footage, and things are down to 4 minutes, nearly five. So I was just, getting those earrings, recreating everything, and getting those holograms down. Once I was done with that, though, I was about ready to start actually doing the line art, finally. So now that I have finished my first rough sketch and then my second rough sketch and then my third rough sketch, now I can finally do the line art above all my rough sketches. So I was going over everything, and one really important thing that I do with when I'm doing my line art is I choose my layers very carefully. I think about what's going to be on top, bottom. For example, I always do the plain skin body first. For example, that would be the hands, the face, and then I like to cut everything up very simply and so that I can do the line art and well, not line art. I usually re-go over my line art later on and so that everything looks a little bit smoother and blends in with everything else. In my opinion, when I have colored lines instead of just black lines, it tends to look a lot better. Um, so I usually do that as like my last step for a drawing, but we don't have to go over that yet. So I was just, going over everything: hair, eyes, face, those little starry space buns, which I wish I could recreate myself, or all those holograms and things that she has. But I am a artist, not a tailor or a scientist. I get ideas in my head and I make them actually look like that. Most of the time, things in my head look a bit better than what's actually coming onto my screen. So, I was just finishing up the hair layer. That rhymes, hey. Uh, I think I was fiddling around with Clip Studio Paint. I'm fairly new to Clip Studio Paint, so there are a lot of things that I would have known how to do in IBIS Paint that I didn't for Clip Studio Paint. So I was just kind of fiddling around with everything, trying to figure out how everything works, uh, solving some little problems, and making sure everything looks nice and how I want it to. So now I'm going over the clothes and just getting all those little details down. Basically, I was just uh, trying to make sure that everything looks as nice as possible and as close to the line art as I possibly can. The strangest thing ever is that sometimes you do a rough sketch and it looks really good, but then you get down to the line art and it looks terrible. So I try my best to make sure that doesn't happen. But of course, nobody's perfect, so sometimes it's tricky to avoid. And then I noticed a situation with the ears, and I didn't want the earring to just be magically there when her hair is somehow in front of it, so I had to adjust the ear's position itself. And then the earrings, and it was this whole mess, but eventually I made it look okay, and I'm glad that I was able to fix it. When you're new to a certain drawing software, then if you make a mistake, then you sometimes don't know how to fix it, and then the entire thing that you worked on for like an hour and a half is ruined. So I'm always so nervous whenever I make a mistake on Clip Studio Paint since I'm new to it, but I'm getting used to it and figuring out how to do everything correctly. So I was coloring in those eyes. Um, Pretty simple. Just I always try to not do any overlap whatsoever, even if it's the tiniest bit that no one's going to be able to notice when they're not zoomed in super close like I am. But, I am very nitpicky and I don't let that happen. Okay, now we're getting into the final steps of line art. And for this, all that really was left was the holograms. I wanted the holograms to be transparent, so I put them to a lower opacity than everything else. Or rather, I put everything in that the holograms were involved with, including color later on, and then I just put that folder to a lower opacity. It's more difficult, but I don't know, just more work for me, I guess. I got a tiny little color scheme of in a corner of the screen so that I can kind of see what colors I want to work with, and then I can just kind of work off of those and try to adjust them a little bit. In the end, everything turned out pretty nicely. So I am coloring around the hair, being very careful not to color over anything or out of the lines. And if there's any tiny little mistake, I will erase it. Even if when you see it from not zoomed in super close, you won't be able to really notice it. I see it, so I must fix it. So I am going over some little mistakes that you tend not to notice when you're in the line art phase. Or at least I tend to not notice them in the line art phase because you can see the rough sketch and all those colors, and then the the line art, and you just kind of tend to notice these sort of things when you're in the middle of coloring, so I just had to kind of fix that and get back to it. So now I am just getting back to that hair coloring. I took a break or something, and now I'm being very careful to work around the piercings because I didn't want to color over them, even though I could just go back over them and it wouldn't be a big deal in the final product. But still, I don't know. It's part of my process. Probably unnecessary, but part of my process. So I'm just finishing up the hair and getting everything colored in a nice. To me, the process of coloring in a piece of art is probably the best part, because then I'm not just redoing a rough sketch or doing the actual rough sketch. Although doing the original rough sketch can be pretty exciting because you're figuring out what to do. If you have art block, it can kind of be cruddy and nightmarish, but once you've figured out what you actually have done, then it's pretty simple. So to me, the coloring process is just simplest because all you really need to do is just color inside the lines and pick what you want things to look like. I added a nice little blue gradient with that amazing gradient tool because it is my best friend. Not literally, but still. I was being very careful not to make any little mistakes or just, I didn't want the gradient to overlap past the buns, so, yeah. So then I was experimenting with other colors, seeing what works well. I didn't want the purple sweater that would just blend in with the hair, and I didn't want a blue sweater that would just look the exact same as the hair also. So I had to go for a much lighter cyan color for the sweater. I didn't want two colors to be right next to each other for different things. I wanted everything to pop and blend together nicely without being too different from each other. I did not want that to happen. So I was being very careful and just kind of experimenting and just like coloring in everywhere to see if everything worked together nicely with everything else for every single layer. And then I started to have problems with Clip Studio Paint. Then I fixed it. Then I went back to drawing. Now I'm giving a silver bluish color for her skirt because I had to put it somewhere, although that was more of an accent color, I guess. So I'm just coloring in those final pieces of the skirt. And I decided to give the skirt and all her metal accessories the same color because, color theory, color combos. It's nice. It works together perfectly. So her rings, her earrings, those bands on her bracelet, and her skirt all have the same color because I think that just pulled everything together nicely. I didn't want all those to have just completely different colors when they didn't need to. So I'm just now experimenting with different deep blues for her shoes. Deep blues for her shoes. Also very fun to say. So, I was finishing up a few things, experimenting with special effects to see if I could get a nice thing going for her shoes. Eventually I figured it out. And now it looks like she's actually defying gravity and floating in a very futuristic-esque way. Now I'm coloring in the holograms, and I'll make them, I'll add them to the folder for the rest of the holograms so that everything else will be transparent. And now I'm hopping straight back into coloring in the holograms. For whatever reason, even though it was pretty much just coloring in a rectangle, I did not want to get these holograms done because, I don't know, it just seems boring, and when things are boring, I don't want to do them. So I just listened to music throughout this entire time lapse. I was just like listening to energetic music or just really pop and happy music, or just something very fast paced. My music palette is very different depending on how I'm feeling that day. I was just finishing up that hologram so it would be done and dusted and I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And then pretty soon after, I was ready to color in this ring thing that I put around her waist. I put everything into that layer. I realized that the cyan would not really work with her sweater, so I gave her a purple layer instead, which really made that specific hologram seem different from the rest. And I mean, it's different in shape, so different in color too, I guess. So I'm just getting everything colored in really nicely and going over the actual base color before adding in the little details. So I am just finishing up those final pieces of the drawing. Once I'm done with this, though, I'm pretty close to done, but then I decide to experiment with Clip Studio Paint a little bit later, and I discover something wonderful. We'll get back to that later in the video. So I am just coloring in those little blocks and apps or whatever those little things are with just lots of different intricate colors. As I previously mentioned, I did not want two specific colors to be the exact same and next to each other. In my head, that will not fly well. So I was making sure that every single thing has to look different. So I'm just making sure that everything looks nice, and then I was pretty much done with the holograms. It's done! Yay! So now I can actually get down to just coloring in the skin color, which is usually my last step, and then I just do the eyes. So now I am hopping straight into experimenting with folders, just fiddling with them, I guess. And now I'm coloring in the skin color. Just being intricate and trying to get everything nice and not something I need to erase a little bit so that it doesn't go outside of the lines. But of course, knowing me, I'm going to make a couple mistakes. And I did. But I fixed them. So I am coloring over everything, then just coloring in those rings of hers. They're pretty boring and just bands, but I don't know, maybe they're part of her technology, so you know. I'll let you decide if they're functional or just there for pizzazz. That's up for you to decide as the person looking at this piece. So now I'm coloring in the white part of the eyes because, you know, people's eyes aren't just color, they have a little bit of whiteness in them too. So now I'm actually working on the eye part of them. I wanted them to be very bright compared to everything else, so it kind of matches with her sweater. Then I decided to give her a bit of a green color to her eyes, experimented with a bit of redness, eventually decided not to do that, and just went for the green. So cyan to green to darker green was her eye stuff. Now I am experimenting with rendering. I have never been able to figure out how rendering works before, but then I figured it out, and I was so happy. So this footage right here is me struggling to figure out how rendering works, and then I figured it out, and it was beautiful. So now I made everything a little bit darker, and then I just chiseled away at what I wanted to have a bit of lighting and what I wanted to stay a bit dark. And I am so glad I figured out how to do this. I'm so happy because it looks so much better than before. So I am just experimenting with the lighting, figuring out how I want everything to look, giving shades and shadows, and rendering really helped boost up this art piece to the next level, and so I am so happy that I figured out how to get it to work. So I'm doing those finishing touches, and now I'm just going over the line art again, coloring in everything as I want, which is usually my last step. So I'm just finishing up everything, and you can really see how different things with rendering looks compared to not with rendering. Currently, I don't have rendering on, so that I can just color in the line art without any difficulties or complications, because rendering is already going to go over the line art itself. So once I was done with the rendering, I could just put on once I was done with the line art, I could put on the rendering again. There we go. Got my words mixed up. So I'm just finishing up everything, putting those last touches in, occasionally glancing at the rendering to see how it looks, and just experimenting with a few things, getting that gradient down for the hair and the line art as well. And now I am just checking to see if there's anything else that needs to get done. Added a little bit of gradient to the eyes, and now we're done. Ta-da! So here is the finished product. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please consider subscribing or giving my video a like if you enjoyed this video, or you just think this picture turned out nicely. Please also consider sending this video to a friend that you think might enjoy this video too. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye!